The auction room was cold, but not because of the air. It was cold because of the silence, the fear, and the pain hanging in the air. The walls were made of metal, dull and gray, with long black stains running down like old tears. Lights flickered. Above, not bright, just enough to see the cages lined up against the walls. Each cage held someone, and each person was more broken than the last. But the girl in the last cage, she was different. She sat quietly, not moving, her thin arms wrapped around her legs. Her hair was tangled, falling over her face. Her skin was bruised, and strange red symbols were burned into her shoulders. She didn't cry anymore. She had run out of tears long ago. She didn't even blink when the auctioneer hit the bars with a metal rod. She's useless. The auctioneer shouted, spitting to the side. No emotions left, no fight left. Who wants her? Anyone? Aliens in rich robes walked past her cage and laughed. Too silent, one said. She doesn't scream anymore. Another added, she was used for years. Her body works, but her mind's probably gone. The girl heard it all, but she didn't react. She had learned long ago, don't move, don't speak, don't look up. Then a sound came different from the others. It was the sound of human boots. Quiet but strong. A man entered the room, tall, with brown hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple jacket, old gloves, and carried nothing but a small bag. The aliens barely noticed him. Just another poor human passing by, but the man walked straight to the last cage. He didn't look at the others, didn't ask questions. He just stopped in front of her. The girl didn't move. She expected him to laugh like the rest, or speak cruel words. But the man simply looked at her, really looked at her. How much for this one? He asked quietly. The auctioneer looked confused. This one? Are you sure? She's not worth anything. The man didn't blink. I asked how much. The auctioneer scratched his chin, shrugged, and gave a low number. Done, the man said. Already reaching for his credit stick, the deal was made in seconds. No one clapped. No one cheered. The gate opened with a hiss, and the girl didn't move. She expected chains or orders or pain, but none came. The man knelt down, held out a soft gray blanket. You can come with me, he said, his voice calm and slow. It's okay now. The girl looked up for the first time in days, her silver blue eyes met his, filled with confusion. She had seen thousands of eyes, cold, cruel, greedy. But his eyes didn't have hunger in them. Only something strange and unfamiliar kindness. She reached out slowly, like a scared animal, and touched the blanket. It was soft, warm, and clean. She stood up on weak legs and followed him, barefoot and silent. The aliens in the room laughed behind them. Good luck fixing that one, human. Someone shouted, but the man didn't reply. He just walked with her to the small ship parked outside. It wasn't a warship or a luxury cruiser, just a small cargo ship, old but working. Inside, the lights were warm, the air smelled clean, and there were no cages. The man led her to a seat, gave her a bowl of soup, and sat across from her. She stared at the food like it was a dream. He didn't rush her, didn't speak, just waited. Finally, she took a bite, then another, then more. She ate fast, like someone afraid the food would be taken away. The man didn't stop her. When she finished, she looked at him again, confused. Why? She asked, her voice rough and dry. He leaned back, folding his arms. Because you didn't deserve what they did to you, he said softly. She didn't understand, not fully. No one had ever said something like that before. That night, he gave her clean clothes, a blanket, and let her sleep in the warmest corner of the ship. He didn't lock the door, didn't touch her, didn't even ask for her name. He just said, you can rest. I'll be here when you wake up. She lay down slowly, her body still tense. But for the first time in many years, her heart didn't race with fear. She closed her eyes and listened to the sound of the engine. It was quiet, soft, peaceful, and though she didn't believe it yet, somewhere deep inside, something began to change. Not trust, not hope, but maybe the beginning of both. The next morning, she woke up and didn't know what to do. There were no chains on her wrists, No collar on her neck, she wasn't in a cage. Wasn't surrounded by cruel laughter, instead. She was lying on a soft bed near the warm engine of the small ship, wrapped in a blanket that smelled clean. She sat up slowly, looking around like an animal still unsure if the trap had closed. In the corner of the ship, the man was fixing something, bent over a panel with wires and tools. He didn't turn when she woke up, didn't rush to ask anything. She watched him for a long moment, wondering if this was still part of the game. Was he just being nice until he wanted something? That's what others had done. Eventually, the man noticed her gaze and offered a small smile. "Good morning," he said. "Sleep okay?" She didn't answer, just lowered her eyes. "Hungry?" he asked and pointed to a bowl of warm food on the table nearby. Without a word, she walked to the table, picked up the bowl, and sat down on the floor to eat. He didn't stop her, didn't force her to sit at the table like some master. He just went back to working on his tools. It felt strange too. Calm, too quiet. After a few minutes, she said something, her voice barely a whisper. "What is this place?" The man looked up, surprised that she spoke again. "This is my ship," he said. "It's not fancy, but it keeps flying." She looked around slowly, then at him. "Why did you take me?" He set his tools down, took a breath, then answered, "Because you were about to disappear, and no one cared." She frowned, confused. "That's not a reason," she said softly. "You don't even know me." The man nodded, agreeing. "No, I don't," he said. "But I saw enough to know you didn't deserve what they did to you." The girl stared at him for a moment, and then said something strange, something honest. "I don't remember my name." He looked at her gently, without shock or pity. "That's okay," he said. "We'll figure one out when you're ready." For a long time, silence filled the ship again, but it wasn't heavy like before it. Felt lighter, open, safe. Later that day, she stood near the window and looked out at the stars. She had seen stars before through bars, through glass, from cages, but never like this. Now they looked beautiful. "Where are we going?" she asked, not turning to face him. "Anywhere but back there," he said from behind her. He didn't give details, didn't promise too much, but the way he said it made her believe it just a little. He showed her how to press the buttons on the wall to call for water, how to use the heater in the corner, and where the emergency pod was. She listened quietly, trying to memorize everything. He gave her a small room of her own, nothing but a bed and a light. Still, it was more than she had ever owned in her life. She sat there that night, knees pulled close again. But not out of fear, this time it was habit. Old pain doesn't fade fast, and trust doesn't grow in a day. But she had eaten 3 full meals that day, and no one hit her, no one shouted, no one touched her. Before sleeping, she whispered a small question to the dark room. "Am I really free?" No one answered, but deep inside her chest, something stirred again. A flicker of feeling she hadn't had in years. The next morning, when the man handed her a warm cloth for her face, she took it with both hands, and for the first time, she whispered 2 words back to him. "Thank you." He smiled softly, not making a big deal about it. "Any time," he replied, and so, without even realizing it, the girl who once had no name began to exist again. Not as property, not as a product, but as a person. And though the journey was far from over, the first step had already been taken. The ship floated through deep space, quiet and gentle inside. Time passed without pain, for the first time in years. She still hadn't chosen a name, and the man still hadn't asked for one. He called her kid sometimes, or just gave a nod, and strange as it felt, it was the most respectful thing she had ever known. One morning, she watched him fix a broken screen near the control panel. He muttered to himself, wires in his hand, tools on the floor. She watched closely, curious, because no one had ever let her close to machines before. He noticed her watching, then smiled. "You want to learn?" he asked, holding out a tool. She froze, not sure if it was a trick, but he didn't push, didn't laugh, just waited. Slowly, she stepped closer and took the tool from his hand. He showed her how to twist wires, how to reconnect pieces she had never done anything like it, but her hands were quick. They had once learned how to serve drinks, how to kneel, how to obey, but now they learned how to build, how to fix. That night, she sat in the corner of her small room, staring at her hands. For the first time, she wondered if she could become something else, not a slave, not a toy, but useful. The man never asked for her story, never asked what they had done to her, and that made her trust him even more, because he didn't need to hear her pain to believe it was real. One evening, she found an old mirror in a storage box and looked at her face. She didn't recognize the girl staring back, eyes too old, lips too quiet. She touched her cheek, then tried something impossible. She tried to smile, but it didn't work. Her face didn't remember how to move that way. It looked strange, broken. And she looked away quickly. Later, she asked him a small question while they ate simple stew. "Do I look human?" He blinked, then frowned, confused. "Of course you do," he said gently. "Why would you ask that?" She shook her head, not answering, but he could guess. "You've always been human," he said softly, "even when they treated you like less." She didn't reply, but the words stayed in her heart all night. The next day, she found an old jacket in storage and tried it on. It was too big, but it felt warm. When the man saw her in it, he smiled and gave a thumbs up. "You look ready to fix a starship," he joked. And this time, something small happened. Her lips twitched. Not a full smile, not yet, but almost. As days passed, she started to clean the ship without being asked. She organized tools, learned to cook basic meals, and helped check fuel levels. The man watched her grow and didn't rush her, didn't praise her too much, just nodded with quiet pride. One night, during a slow drift through a calm starfield, they sat near the main window. The stars were everywhere, soft and endless. She leaned her head on the glass and whispered, "Do stars feel lonely?" The man looked at her, surprised by the question. "I think stars are like people," he said. "Some are alone, some are not, but they still shine." She nodded, not saying more, and as the stars moved past the window, she didn't feel so empty inside. There were still shadows in her mind, still moments where nightmares made her wake up shaking. But the man never got angry, never told her to be strong. He simply brought her a blanket, sat beside her and said, "You're safe now." Sometimes those two words were all she needed. She began writing small things in a notebook. He gave her words she liked, dreams she didn't understand, drawings of stars and faces. One evening, she finally wrote a name at the top of the page. Not her old name, not the one they had called her. A new name, one she chose. She hadn't shown it to him yet, not ready, but it was hers. And when she stood in the mirror again the next morning, she tried to smile one more time. It still looked a little strange, but not broken anymore. Just new, like her, and somewhere deep inside, the girl who never smiled began to change into someone who might, one day soon. Asterisk, the girl had started to sleep through the night. That was something she never thought would happen again. No nightmares, no flinching at shadows, no waking up gasping, but one night, a knock changed everything. It wasn't a loud knock, not on a door, but a sound at the ship's comm panel, an incoming signal. The man leaned forward, tapping the controls. "Unregistered vessel," the voice said on the speaker. "Requesting docking access for medical emergency." The man narrowed his eyes, not answering right away. She stood nearby, quiet but alert, even after all the peace. Something in her heart still knew how to read danger. "Can we trust them?" she asked quietly. He glanced at her, then back at the screen. "I don't know," he said. "But if someone's hurt, I can't turn them away." She didn't stop him. She understood. The ship docked with theirs 10 minutes later, a small shuttle, old and damaged, connected with the airlock. When it opened, a young alien girl stumbled inside, coughing, her skin pale. Behind her was a tall alien man, thin and tired-looking, his arm bandaged and eyes sunken. "We're not here to hurt you," the man said, raising his empty hands. "Just need help. Just medicine, please." The human nodded and helped them inside. Guiding them to the med corner, the girl watched from the side, her arms crossed tightly. Something about the tall alien made her feel cold inside. She didn't remember his face, but she remembered eyes like that, dead eyes, cold eyes, the kind that never cared later. When the alien girl was sleeping in the warm corner with a blanket, the tall man stepped closer. He looked at her, the girl who had once been a slave, and smirked. "You," he said softly, just loud enough for her to hear. "I thought you looked familiar." Her blood turned cold. The human walked over quickly, standing between them. "Step back," he warned. The tall alien chuckled and lifted his hands again. "No trouble," he said. "Just surprised to see one of the old toys still working." The girl didn't move, didn't blink, but her hands were shaking. The human noticed. And without another word, he turned to the alien and said, "You've had your rest. Take your ship and leave." The alien looked like he wanted to argue, but something in the man's eyes made him stop. "Fine," he said, and left with his injured companion. As soon as the door sealed, the girl sat down on the floor, trembling. "I know him," she whispered. "He was one of the buyers." The man knelt beside her, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he said. "He won't come back." But she was shaking too hard to believe it. That night, she didn't sleep. The fear came back quiet. Slow, like smoke under a door, she sat near the engine again, hugging her knees, watching the shadows in the morning. The human found her still there. He didn't speak at first, just sat beside her and placed a warm cup in her hand. "He's gone," the man said quietly, "but I know that doesn't erase what happened." She nodded slowly, eyes heavy. "Will they all come back?" she asked, voice small. "I don't think so," he answered. "But even if they do, I won't let them touch you again." The words weren't just soft, they were strong. And she believed them more than she expected. Later that day, she asked to help fix the engine. A part of it was rattling. Together, they opened the panels and adjusted wires and bolts. She liked working with her hands, liked that her fingers had learned to repair instead of serve. As they worked, she looked at him and said something unexpected. "You're the first person who sees me as something more." He paused, looked at her, and said gently, "I don't see you as anything less." That sentence sat in her chest like light. That night, when she stood in the mirror again, she didn't look for her old face. She looked for the new one, the one becoming stronger, and this time she smiled, just a little. Not because she had forgotten the past, but because she was building something new. One piece at a time, one promise at a time. The ship landed on a small trade planet. Nothing special, just fuel, supplies, and a bit of open sky. It was the first time she had stepped on real ground in years. The wind touched her face, and for a moment, she didn't move. She had almost forgotten what air felt like, what a real sky looked like. The man walked ahead, carrying a bag of spare parts, but he kept glancing back at her, making sure she was okay. She stayed close, her eyes scanning everything: streets, signs, people, exits. She was walking free, but her heart still wore chains. They entered a small market filled with aliens and humans, each bartering, talking, moving fast. She flinched when someone brushed past her shoulder. "Sorry," the stranger said, without even looking back. But she wasn't used to apologies. Then came the stares. Some aliens paused and looked at her, not with kindness, not with interest, but with recognition. Old symbols were still faintly visible on her arms, burned deep from years ago. The mark of a personal slave. One alien vendor, tall and red-skinned, leaned over his booth and whispered something to his friend. She heard it. "Still got the collar burn," he said. "Bet she still remembers how to kneel." The man beside her turned, sharp and fast. He stared down the alien with cold, quiet fire in his eyes. "Don't," he said, voice low and calm, but full of warning. The alien looked away, suddenly quiet. She stared at the ground, heart pounding. Shame rushing back like a storm. She whispered, "I shouldn't have come out." But the man shook his head. "No," he said. "You're not the one who did anything wrong." He bought what they needed and led her out of the market, away from the stares and whispers. They walked behind the old buildings until they found a quiet hill near the edge of the port. The stars were starting to show in the sky. She sat down on a rock, her arms wrapped around herself. He sat beside her but said nothing for a long time. Then she asked, "Do you really think I can ever be normal?" He tilted his head, thinking. "I don't think you have to be normal," he said. "I think you just have to be real." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. She looked at the sky again and said, "They still see me as a thing." He nodded. "Some will, maybe forever. But not everyone." She looked at him, and he was serious, honest, not feeding her false hope, but giving her truth. "I see you," he added, "and every day you become more yourself." They sat in silence as the sun disappeared and the stars took over. Later that night, back on the ship, she stood in front of the old mirror again. She took a marker and slowly, carefully, drew a line across the old brand on her shoulder, a black line through the past, not to erase it, but to mark where it ends. She walked to the cockpit where he was setting the course. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him. Then she whispered, "I don't want to hide anymore." He turned, looked at her, then gave a slow nod. "Then we don't hide," he said, and together they left that planet behind. But they didn't leave as a master and a slave. They left as two people, one learning how to heal, and one helping her believe it was possible. Asterisk. The stars were soft and quiet that night. The ship was drifting gently through empty space. No rush, no mission, just peace. She sat alone in her small room, holding the old notebook he had given her weeks ago. Its pages were filled now, small words, rough drawings, pieces of thought, memories she was brave enough to keep. And on one page, written and circled a dozen times, was a single name, a name she had never heard before, one she had made up herself. She whispered it again, letting it roll across her tongue, testing the way it felt. It didn't belong to the past. It belonged to her now. She stood up, heart beating fast, and walked through the quiet hallway of the ship. He was sitting near the main controls, reading a data pad, legs up, relaxed. When she entered, he looked up and gave her a soft smile. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, just stepped closer, holding the notebook to her chest. Then she took a deep breath and said something she had never said before. "My name is Lyra." He blinked, surprised, then slowly stood up. "Lyra," he repeated, letting the name sit in the air. She nodded, her voice shaking. I wanted a name that was mine, not one they gave me." The man smiled, not too wide, just enough to show how proud he was. "It's a beautiful name," he said. "It suits you." She felt something warm rise in her chest, something like sunlight inside her ribs. No one had ever said that before. They had called her numbers, nicknames, orders, but never anything that belonged only to her. Now she had a name, and someone had spoken it like it mattered. "Lyra," he said again softly, "welcome to yourself." The words made her eyes sting, not with pain, but with something else she hadn't felt in years, joy. She sat beside him and stared out the window at the stars. "Do you think I'm changing?" she asked, her voice quiet. He thought for a moment, then replied, "I think you're becoming who you were always meant to be." She looked down at her hands that once trembled, now steady. "I still feel broken sometimes," she admitted. He nodded. "Healing isn't about pretending you were never hurt. It's about learning that your wounds don't define you." They sat in silence after that, the kind of silence that felt safe, not empty. Lyra rested her head lightly on the back of the chair, looking at him from the corner of her eye. He wasn't like anyone else. He didn't treat her like a child, or a victim, or a pet. He treated her like a person, and more than that, like someone who mattered. That night, she returned to her room, but she didn't sleep right away. She lay on her bed, notebook beside her, repeating her name softly to the dark. "Lyra." She touched the collarbone where the old brand used to burn. It didn't hurt anymore, not when she remembered her name. Days passed, and the ship continued its slow journey across empty systems. They worked together on repairs, shared meals, watched strange documentaries, and laughed at dumb old jokes. Her laugh was still awkward, still uncertain, but it was real. Sometimes he would ask her things like, "What do you want to learn next?" Or, "What place do you dream of seeing?" No one had ever asked what she wanted before. One evening, while cleaning out an old supply crate, she found a small silver chain with a blank tag on it. She held it for a moment, then smiled. She carved one word into the tag, Lyra, and placed it around her neck. When he saw it later that day, he just nodded with quiet approval. It wasn't a collar, not anymore. It was a nameplate, a statement, a quiet victory, her victory. And as she walked through the hallway of the ship, her bare feet soft against the floor, she no longer felt like a ghost. She felt like Lyra, alive, present, and maybe, just maybe, loved. The ship had been quiet for days, not the kind of quiet that came from pain or fear, but from peace. Lyra was no longer the same girl who sat in a cage, afraid to look up. Now she woke early, helped repair systems, made meals, and spoke freely sometimes. Even teased him, and every time she smiled, it looked more natural, more hers. The man, his name was Caleb, watched her change and never once rushed her. He still called her by her name, softly, like it was something sacred, and to her. It was one evening, as the stars stretched across the sky like spilled silver. Lyra stood beside him at the cockpit. They had just finished a quiet dinner, and the air smelled like warm herbs and engine grease. She was holding a mug of tea, fingers wrapped around it, lips thoughtful. "Can I ask you something strange?" she said, not looking at him. "Of course," he replied. As always, she took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is love real?" The question hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. He turned to her slowly, searching her eyes. Not to find weakness, but to understand the pain behind that question. "Yes," he said at last, "but it's not what people think it is." Lyra blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Caleb leaned back, looking out the glass window. "Love isn't always big," he said. "It's not always loud or full of words. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's making sure someone feels safe. Sometimes it's listening without asking for anything back." She looked down at her hands, thinking, "I think I felt that," she whispered, "but I don't know how to give it." "Not the right way," he shook his head gently. "There's no one right way." Silence followed, warm and full of emotion. Then she turned to him and said something so honest, it made the stars outside feel closer. "If love is real, then I think I've been learning it from you." Caleb's breath caught for just a second, but he smiled, soft and proud, and a little surprised. "And I think I've been learning it from you too," he replied. That night, Lyra stood in front of the mirror again, but this time she didn't study her scars. She touched the silver tag on her chest and whispered, "I am Lyra. I am free. I am loved." She didn't cry, not this time. She simply stood stronger, still quiet, but powerful in a way no one had ever let her be before. The next day, something small but important happened. She brought him a piece of scrap metal shaped like a ring, crude and unfinished, and handed it to him with both hands. "I don't know what this means on your world," she said softly, "but I want to stay with you. Not as a rescued thing, but as someone who chooses you." Caleb held the ring, eyes wide, surprised and quiet. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that said everything without needing a single word. He placed the ring on his finger and pulled her into a soft, careful hug. "You were never just a thing," he whispered. "But now, you're my equal." And she smiled fully, beautifully, for the first time in her life. Not because she was someone's property or someone's prize, but because she was someone's partner. And in that little ship floating through endless stars, love didn't arrive with flowers or music. It arrived with silence, kindness, and a second chance. Together, they flew on, not as rescuer and rescued, but as two souls, healing, rebuilding, and writing a new story, one no one could take from them, because now she wasn't just free, she was home.